Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage AIDS specialist and Red Ambassador, Dr. Patricia Asamoah. I walked into the antenatal or prenatal clinic, as some call it, one day, and one of my midwives just came to me and almost in a whisper said to me, "Doctor, you have to see this patient." I knew immediately that what I was dreading had come. The reason was that I knew just by her tone and by the look on her face that that day was the first day ever I was going to have to tell a healthy-looking pregnant woman that she was HIV positive. And it wasn't a pleasant thing. A group of us had been sent and we had been trained on how to test HIV in pregnant women, and it was our first experience. After the training, the nurses automatically nominated me as the bearer of bad news. They had decided that it was okay for them to do the test, and they were comfortable telling anybody who was negative that they were HIV negative, but they were not going to disclose anybody's HIV positive status to them. They said, "We are going to bring them all to you. You are the doctor, you tell them." Of course, it wasn't easy. I was very anxious, and I was also a little frightened. Not because I can't tell the woman that she's positive, but I was just imagining how I was going to manage the whole situation. How was I going to console her? How was I going to get her to understand that this whole process was for us to help her so she could have an HIV negative baby? So there were all these thoughts going on through my mind. What was I going to do? I had never done it before. It was my very first time. So this woman came to my consulting room. She's called Ruth. Very beautiful young woman, 23 years, newly married, and this was her first pregnancy. So we sat down, had a bit of chat, Then I told her that, of course, went back to the things they had told her, the bit of the counseling they gave her before the test, and I told her, "So what were you expecting? What did they tell you?" Then I said, "Well, you are HIV positive." Immediately she broke down and started crying. I couldn't hold myself. We've been trained not to cry. That's one of the things you are trained. As a doctor, you're not to show your emotions. You're not supposed to let people see how you feel. But it was very, very hard for me. And I can't even remember some of the things I said. I just mumbled some words. I was also confused myself, hugged her, and just reassured her that we were all there for her and we were going to support her. So that ended our first difficult hurdle. Then, after we had a few sessions with her, she said she was going to disclose to her husband. So we gave her the techniques. "So how are you going to say it?" Then she said, "All right, what time would you do it?" So we kind of went through a bit of a rehearsal for her to choose the time, how she would say it. So she went and disclosed to her husband. And to the shock of our lives, when he tested, he was HIV negative. Everything went haywire. It was bad enough having our first HIV positive pregnant woman, but it was worse having to deal with two troubles, a discordant couple. We didn't know much about serodiscordance at that time, and a serodiscordant just means that one partner is HIV positive and the other is HIV negative. And later we got to know that we had 30% of our couples being serodiscordant. And also we had more women being positive with their partners being negative, because it's easier to transmit the virus from a man to a woman than from a woman to a man. So we were all so confused. Of course, they will push all the problem to you. "Doctor, please, you have to help them." And that was how it was. But we went through the whole process, and it wasn't very easy for us. We ourselves didn't have much experience, and we had to go through, it was almost like a journey for all of us, both the patient and ourselves who were providing the care for her. One of the things we always said to encourage to encourage pregnant women to test for HIV was that one of the main modes of transmission of HIV is having unprotected sex. I can't look at anybody's face in this room and say they've had unprotected sex. But if someone is pregnant, I can safely say that they have had unprotected sex, and therefore they could possibly have HIV. And so that was how we got them, to even start thinking about the possibility that they could be HIV positive. So when we did the test for the man and he was negative, we now had to explain medically that it is not that Ruth was made pregnant by another man, which is the first thing that will come to your mind. Then I'm not the one who is responsible. If I am HIV negative and my wife is HIV positive, then possibly I'm not the one who made her pregnant. But we had to explain to the husband that this is possible. These are the reasons, and this is how it goes. So he kind of understood, and he was very, very supportive. And so we went through the whole process, testing. Ruth had to take her medication, which we call the antiretroviral medication. So she took that. But there were so many other challenges. The other challenges was that they had to make the choice, even before the baby was born, what form of feeding they would want to have, whether they wanted to do exclusive breastfeeding for some time or they want to do formula feeding. Interestingly, some people think that it is automatic that you do formula feeding. But back in Ghana, there are so many issues with formula feeding. So we had to go through it, discuss it, for them to make a choice that will work. Because you are not the one who is going to be in their home. You are not the one who is going to provide the money to buy the formula. You are not the one who is going to do any of those things. So they have to discuss it and then come to an agreement as to what they think they can do practically to have an HIV-negative baby. So they made their choice. Come the day of labor, she is going to have a baby. I quickly ran there. I was so excited, but I was also very, anxious. And is it going to work? We've never done it before. So she went through normal vaginal delivery and had a healthy baby. The baby is called Benedicta. But we had to wait for 18 months to know for sure whether she was HIV positive or she was HIV negative. The reason being that the test we had to do at that time was an antibody test. All babies carry their mother's antibodies in so many ways. Antibodies for so many diseases, antibodies even to help them in their first few months of life. And they only have their own antibodies after they are 18 months old. And so if you tested a baby with an HIV test, which is an antibody test, and they tested positive, it doesn't really tell you that they are positive. What it tells you is that their mother is positive, which we knew already. So there was no point doing that test. So we had to wait for 18 months. As we were waiting for 18 months, then the challenge of the infant feeding came. They had chose to do exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, stop abruptly, and then continue with complementary feed. The challenge, the reasons were quite a lot. The first one is that, as I said, formula feeding is expensive. In Ghana, we had embraced the baby-friendly initiative, which meant that 99% of women breastfeed. Breastfeeding had been touted to be the best choice and the first choice. And so if you wanted not to breastfeed, then the choice was yours to provide the formula. Nobody was going to support you. The government doesn't support that because clearly breastfeeding was superior to infant feeding. The other thing was the stigma. 99% of women breastfeed. So if you do not breastfeed, then everybody will want to find out why. Why are you not breastfeeding? Do you have a problem? Everyone will be all over you, and you will not be able to handle it. And for us, as far as labor and having children is concerned, we are very, very interfering. Because we are supportive, we would interfere. So when you have a baby, your mother will come. Your mother-in-law will come. All your aunties are going to come. In fact, if you are a younger sibling, all your older sisters will come. Everybody wants to support you and to help you and for you to be comfortable, and so they will all be there. So if you were HIV positive, it means you had to explain to each and every one of them why you are not breastfeeding. And of course, you were not ready to do that. You probably want only your husband to know that you are positive, not share the information with the whole world. And so that's the other one. And the other reason was also because of the choice of the water. If you are not assured of having clean water, access to clean water all the time, then we encouraged you to do exclusive breastfeeding and then change on to any other feeds which will not interfere with the feeding. Someone will say, but there's a risk in giving the breast milk. Yes, because the virus is contained in breast milk. It's not as if it is not true. It is. But it was safer if you did exclusive breastfeeding than if you did mixed feeding. A bit of breastfeeding, a bit of water, a bit of formula. It doesn't work that way. So after we had explained all that, Ruth chose that method. So there were quite a lot of challenges with that, because then the same interfering people will tell you, the breast milk is not enough. Why are you not adding something else? And so they make your head spin. So we just went through the process slowly, and then come 18 months. So when Benedicta was 18 months, we did the test, and she was HIV negative. We were all so happy. We were excited. And in fact, for the first time, we allowed ourselves to cry. Tears of joy. It was such a moving moment for us. For her, because she took the risk to listen to us and even did some of the things that seemingly were medically conflicting. If the breast milk contains the virus, why don't I opt out? But she went ahead to do everything that we said. And we, because we knew about it. You've learned about a process. You've studied it, but you've never really gone through it. And even though you knew it theoretically, you have never had any practical experience. Other people have done studies. They say it works. What about if your very first patient fails? What about if for the very first time, the very first ever pregnant woman you decide to do the intervention on, she has an HIV negative baby? It means that you would be so crushed, you may not even be able to continue with the program again. So we were so happy, and we were all very emotionally, I don't know how to describe it. Mothers will actually leap when you tell them that their children are negative. It's almost like they jump out. Even though you kind of know, because you've been following the children, you know they are not ill, you know they haven't had any problems, but you want to be very sure. And that was what happened at 18 months. We've had such more beautiful moments, not only with Ruth. Ruth has gone on to have another HIV-negative child. Other women have also gone through the experience, and we know that these things work. It's not just that we've just heard about them, but we've seen them practically. And if mothers are given the correct intervention and they go through all the process, we would have an HIV generation, a generation which is free of HIV very soon. Thank you. Dr. Patricia